Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Super excited to have a very special guest diving into quantum computing and AI. Geordie Rose is with us today. He's the founder and CEO of Snowdrop Quantum Applications Corporation, and also a former founder, chief CEO of Sanctuary AI, as well as Kindred.ai, and then former founder and chief technology officer of D-Wave Systems. Geordie, super excited to have you on the show here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Looking
Thank you.
forward to it.
And I actually recorded a video earlier this morning just saying it's negative 4 degrees here in Minnesota, freezing our tails off. But of course, you're up in even more north than we are here in Minnesota, up in Canada. So hope it's a little bit warmer up there. Or maybe it's not.
Well, we're about the same as Minnesota right now, but Vancouver is usually pretty warm. We're going
Uh-huh.
through a cold spell.
Yeah. No, very good. Well, good. Well, I thought we'd just kind of start with your origin story, just kind of almost like comic book episode one, just a little bit of background of who you are and how you came to do what you're doing now.
My supervillain origin story.
That's right.
Uh, well, I've moved around a lot as a kid. I was born in East Africa in Tanzania. Moved to Canada when I was quite young and lived in a bunch of towns all over the place. Not too far from Minnesota, actually, in northern Ontario. Uh, Settled down in Hamilton, which is in Ontario, to do an undergraduate degree in engineering. Then I moved to Vancouver to do a PhD in theoretical physics. And that's where I kind of started learning about the whole quantum mechanics, fundamental principles kinds of things. And from that, I founded D-Wave, which was the world's first quantum computing company. I was CEO for a while, and then I got promoted to CTO, involuntarily promoted. Uh, and I ran technology there for about 10 years. And through that, my career kind of made a left turn where I moved into a type of artificial intelligence, which was new back then, but now has become quite mainstream, which is the type of AI that lives inside robots, which is sometimes called embodied AI, embodied because it's in a body.
Okay.
And the second half of my career through Kindred and Sanctuary were spent trying to build AI systems that reside inside a body, much like the kind of intelligence that lives inside animals or people. I've kind of done a little bit of a another left turn recently and gone back to my roots, and I'm trying to combine the work that I did on AI with quantum computing in my most recent venture, Snowdrop.
Oh, very
Oh, and
interesting.
along the way, I did a
Yeah.
bunch of combative stuff too. So I wrestled through university, won a couple national championships in Canada, and then took up Brazilian jiu-jitsu after my wrestling career was done. And I'm very close, but not quite at black belt.
Wow, that's incredible. And so, how did you get into the jujitsu?
Well, wrestling is very difficult as you get older. It's the kind of thing that requires full-time dedication, and you can't do it past a certain point competitively because your body starts to fall apart. So I was looking for something that was an alternative that I could keep doing as I got older. And jiu-jitsu is a great landing place for ex-combat athletes of other disciplines.
Okay.
I've met a lot of people that were high level in judo and sambo and a bunch of other things that are now sharing the mats on the jiu-jitsu side. And I'm in my mid 50s, and that would have been, there are no wrestlers in their mid 50s. It doesn't exist. But in jiu-jitsu, you can get a bunch of us old dudes who can sit around and talk about our glory days and still get a workout on the mat.
So, what is it about jujitsu that people can continue? I mean, because I hear of so many people. I mean, even like Joe Rogan famously, but like people that in their 50s, 40s, 50s, and beyond that are doing that. What about jujitsu allows you to keep doing it, whereas wrestling wouldn't?
It's a good question because I think like, at the top levels of competitive jiu-jitsu, it's actually quite like wrestling in that you compete every weekend, you're training twice a day, you're really going hard all the time. I think the difference is that in jiu-jitsu, there's another path. In wrestling, that's the only thing. There is you're in it or you're not. You're winning tournaments or you're trying to or you're not. That's it. In jiu-jitsu, there's another whole category of thing where you have people who are just trying to learn how to do it without competing, without putting in the, cutting weight, without doing twice a days and competing every weekend. So when I started doing it, I realized that there was a whole bunch of people from the, people like me, the 53-year-old dads who do it twice a week, all the way up to people who I would consider to be Olympic level caliber athletes. And when you go to a club, the vast majority of people in that club are going to be in the first category.
Okay.
So jiu-jitsu gives you this gradient where you can choose to just be around people who have the same culture and goals as you do, which is just to spend time with the guys, meet people who are like-minded, because combat sports tend to attract a certain kind of mentality,
Right. Sure.
even if they're not competing, and learn, like I think that one of the attractions for me to work in the gi, specifically like the kimono,
Uh-huh.
the outfit thing, is that it's almost infinitely learnable. So I've been doing it for almost 20 years now, and I can still, like, every day I go in, there's something that I haven't noticed or seen or appreciated or done before that I'm exposed to. Wrestling isn't like that. Wrestling is there's three things that work at the international level, and all you have to do is drill them over and over and over and over. And it's a little bit more like boxing in that the number of ways that you can engage with a person successfully is quite limited. In boxing, there's like 5 punches and that's it. In wrestling, it's sort of the same thing, is that some kind of weird creative people like Ben Askren aside, most people who compete at a high level only do a small number of things, but they do them well. But jiu-jitsu isn't like that. It's a sort of thing where there's always something just a little bit different that makes you just a little bit better. And that kind of gradient of getting better, just small steps that get you better and better and better, is very attractive, especially if you're like somebody who likes to learn and get better at something, which I am.
Yeah.
So I really like it. I'd actually recommend it to anybody, even if you've never done anything like this before. If you're interested in any kind of sport at all, try it out. Like, go to a local jiu-jitsu gym. People are very friendly. They're not going to laugh at you because you're uncoordinated and don't know what to do. They're going to
Uh,
help you. And one piece of advice I'd give people who do this is don't quit until you've submitted someone at least once. So
okay.
put that barrier in there. It's like, I'm going to stick with this until I make someone tap, because once you get the feeling of submitting another grown man, it sort of gives you that dopamine hit. It's the reward for all the work.
I believe it. That's incredible. Oh, very good. Well, maybe we'll shift gears to Snowdrop. Tell us a little bit about what is Snowdrop, and how are you combining, your quantum computing history and with AI.
So the quantum world is at an interesting point in that the machines, the actual computers themselves, have likely demonstrated the capability to do things beyond what you can do with conventional computers for a very specific limited class of things. So it isn't like, these are going to replace NVIDIA chips
Uh-huh.
anytime soon. That's not the case. But for very specific, weird, exotic problems, of which, as far as I know, there are only two. So there's two problems that these computers probably can do better than any other computer that you could build, even in principle. So that's good. That's a progress in the field.
Sure.
But the problem now is that this hardware demonstrations, like the Google Willow thing that was in the news a couple months ago,
Hmm.
haven't come with applications or software advances that take advantage of those capabilities. So right now they're just kind of interesting scientific tools. They're kind of like, I don't know, like a particle accelerator or something. Like, it
Okay.
teaches you something about the world, about nature, yes, but you can't use a particle accelerator to, make stuff or solve problems that aren't
Uh-huh.
just like what happens when I smash these particles together. So the quantum computers right now are kind of like that. They're these special purpose things that don't really do anything useful. So the I had an idea a long time ago about how to augment the a certain kind of AI program, which is called an agent. So an agent is a software program that has agency, which means it makes decisions and takes actions. So
Mhm.
not all AI is like this. Some of it is just a tool that responds to what you ask, but some AI, especially more recently, actually acts by making decisions. So it'll look at a bunch of things and it'll say, I want to do that one. And there's a type of way to combine these two ideas that is new. So generally, when I start doing something, no one else is doing it and everybody thinks it's weird. So when I started the quantum computing thing, it was completely outrageous. Like nobody had ever heard of it. Wasn't even clear that they could work. I was back in 1999. And when I started Kindred, no one had built robots that made their own decisions about what to do in a warehouse. And we
Huh.
were the first to do that. And then at Sanctuary, we were the first ones to build humanoid robots. If you take Boston Dynamics out of the equation, because they're kind of like the OG of robotics, they've been doing everything longer than anybody.
Sure.
But taking them out, we were the first ones to actually try to put agency into humanoids specifically to do work. So all of those times when we initiated those projects, we were the only ones doing it, and everybody thought we were crazy and didn't understand what we were talking about. So I tend to like things that are like that, which
Uh-huh.
are kind of crazy, but I can wrap my head around why it might make sense. My background, and this is one of those. So I found a way, I think, to combine what the quantum computers do well now, not in the future, but today, with a certain kind of agent. And the way that I'm developing it is by building a new kind of game. So a lot of AI first is built to build an agent that plays a game, like
Okay.
chess or Go or whatever.
Mhm.
And this new type of game is designed to showcase this new type of agent that uses a quantum computer to make better decisions. So it's I've been working on it basically, by myself. There's a couple people who are helping me with some of the things, but it's mostly a one person show at this point for about 6 months now,
Okay.
and it's looking quite promising. And what I'm planning on doing is releasing this game shortly and putting up a money prize for anybody who can beat this agent that I've built. So
Huh.
the idea would be I have my game player, and he's sat in front of the game board, and you can challenge this thing, and if you beat it, you get a prize. So I'm still working out the details, but I'm going to try to make it so that anybody can see what I did, like be very open about the
Okay.
whole business, and then try to win some money by building a competing agent that beats me. And by the way, like in the AI world, building things that beat other things on benchmarks is kind of the whole culture of the field. So I'm
Uh-huh.
hopeful that this will actually take off and be a thing.
That's fascinating. So is it a totally brand new game you've created okay.
Yeah. So there's I didn't know this when I started because I wasn't really into the whole background theory of games, but games have played a very important role in the development of mathematics and AI for thousands of years. They're kind of like in some ways like where the weird like platonic world of math meets the noisy, busy, chaotic world of a person's mind. They're they're
Okay.
they're they're a middle ground. So when you look at a chessboard, it's not a war. A war doesn't look anything like chess, but chess is kind of like this mathematical idealization of war. And because it sits in this gray area between the platonic world of math and AI and the busy world of the human mind, you can test things in games where you don't have all the complexity, but it still has some of the properties of the real world. So this new kind of game is like that. It's designed to be like a board game, and there are many board games that are very similar to this thing. One of them is a game called Hex, which is a fairly old and unknown game, which was sort of co-invented by John Nash, the guy from A Beautiful Mind, that
Huh.
movie.
Yeah.
But it's basically you play it on a board that's a bunch of hexagons, and you put colored markers down, and you try to make a line between two sides or the top and the bottom if you play the other two players. So it's a kind of a game like that. You take turns placing stones on a board, and there's a win condition, and you play against another person, and it's a zero sum game, which means if I win, you lose, and vice versa.
Okay. Interesting. So what about you'd mentioned earlier with quantum computers, there's kind of two problems at this point. that they can solve? What are those two problems?
So they both have the same flavor, which is it takes advantage of the fact that quantum computers are probabilistic, which means if I send the same problem into a quantum computer, I don't get the same answer all the time. And but what you do is you get what's called a probability distribution, which means all answers are not equally likely.
Okay.
So, for example, if I ask you, "Will it snow today in Minnesota?" There is an answer to that, which you find by actually observing the weather. But the answer isn't 100% or zero. It's like, I don't know, 20% or something.
Uh-huh.
So when you actually run the experiment, and if I measured the weather over the next 2 weeks and I just measure snow day, no snow day, snow day, no snow day, what you'll find is that it's one is more likely than the other, but it's still kind of random.
Okay.
So in a quantum computer is not just like the weather in that it's random, it's like essentially random. It's part of the reason why these things do the things they do. So both of them are like this. You have to ask the same problem many times, like say 1,000, and then you collect the answers from the machine, 1,000 answers, and then you ask what is the probability of each of these things occurring, and some of them will be more likely than others.
Okay.
So the two problems, the first one that was demonstrated is a problem called random circuit sampling. So the way this works is you essentially set all of the parameters of your quantum computer to be random, all of them, and then you measure what happens.
Okay.
So this is not interesting from the applications perspective because you could imagine that might be a very hard thing to turn into something useful.
Uh-huh.
But from the science perspective, it's quite interesting because you can prove under some reasonable assumptions that the probability distribution you get out can't be calculated by a conventional computer. So the
Hmm.
probabilities of these different output states, you can't figure out what they are in advance at all. And it's a very weird thing because usually what we're used to is probabilities being somewhat conceptually calculable, like the thing I used with the weather. You know, you could
Sure.
look back in time and say, well, in February, 20% of the days it snows in, Duluth or wherever I live. So but the quantum computing thing is not like that. There's no known way using any technology that we're aware of that obeys the laws of physics to
Huh.
calculate what those probabilities are. They're completely unknowable until you actually go out and measure them, which is a weird thing. But this is, part of the reason why scientists are interested in it. The
Sure.
second one is a little bit more down to earth, but it's still fairly esoteric. It's the simulation of a magnet. So a magnet, this is what I did my PhD stuff in, so stop me if I'm being too obscure, but so imagine you have like a little like magnet, like a north pole, south pole magnet. North pole points up, south pole points down.
Okay.
And now imagine I have a bunch of them and I put them like, on a table. If I just let them go, the north poles and the south poles will try to like touch each other.
Sure.
But under certain circumstances, the system becomes what's called frustrated, which means it can't actually go where it wants to go because it's being blocked by something. So the orientation of all the north poles of those magnets, after you've put them down on the table and let them like snap to where they want to be, is another one of these problems where if you do it 1,000 times, you'll get 1,000 different answers, and you can't calculate what they will be if the magnets are quantum magnets. Just think of them as normal magnets, but with some other properties.
Okay.
So this other thing, which is a more closely related to like material science actual problems that you'd want to care about if you were like a theoretical physicist, is another one. But it's got the same flavor. It's esoteric. It's very hard to understand unless you're an expert in the field. It's only useful for the specific narrow thing that it's doing. It's very hard to turn it into something else. But it's potentially, in both cases, creates a situation where you can get answers from the universe that you wouldn't normally be able to get using conventional computers.
Very interesting. So what, I mean, going outside those problems, what do you see as, future trends, opportunities, possibilities for quantum computing and with practical applications? Like, where do you?
It's hard to say
Yeah.
because we're in this area. So the culture of the quantum computing folks, people who do this sort of work, are enthralled and driven by the kind of thing I talked about first, which is these sort of scientific problems, and they use applications as an excuse to fund their work.
Okay.
So this field has always been like this. It's not filled with people who want to build useful things. It's filled with people who want to answer scientific questions. And the culture of a field is kind of a little bit like a culture of a company. It's very hard to change. And there's somebody once said this thing about, science progresses one death at a time. Uh, the quantum computing field got locked into a very toxic mindset, and it's difficult to get out of it, and it's still in it. So I don't think that the progress of turning these machines into something useful is actually going to come from within the field. It's going to come from outside the field. In
Okay.
order for that to happen, the systems have to be easy enough to use for normal people to use them, and right now they're not. So I think that there's going to be continued progress on the hardware side, but I think that there's going to be a little bit of stagnation in the utility side because the right kinds of people aren't looking at the problems. All the smart people who have good ideas about how to build things are going into AI these days
Okay.
because there's a whole bunch of low hanging fruit of useful things you can do. There's this new technology that's basically untapped. It's a total greenfield opportunity.
Uh-huh.
And most smart young kids are going into AI, not physics, not quantum computing. The quantum computing is becoming a little bit of a backwater of the really smart top people. Um, and because of that, it's going to take a while, I think. So if I was to guess, I think probably, so this thing that I'm working on might actually work. If it does, it'll be the first time that something non weird is done using a quantum computer that matters to people. And games are kind of an edge case, right? Because are they useful? Is a game
Sure.
useful? I don't know. It's kind of depends on what you mean by the word useful, I suppose. A
Uh-huh.
lot of people play games, they're big business. But, it's not solving cancer or anything like that. So I think, like, aside from the sort of thing I'm doing, uh, probably the thing that people think of when they think of a future with these machines in it is at least a decade away, probably two, I would guess.
Okay.
It'll probably happen. And I say probably because, hype aside, the field still has a lot of mysteries and unanswered questions that are sitting right at its foundation. It's not like it's just turn this crank and you get a faster computer. It's not like that at all. Like a lot of this stuff is built on a bunch of assumptions and views about how the world works that might actually turn out to be wrong. So I'm not bullish on quantum computing in the short term. I think it's going to be a long road. And there are other things that are more interesting than it right now. But in the long run, I think it'll probably pay off, but it's going to take a while.
Yeah. So saying all that, what made you decide to make the pivot away from AI back into quantum computing?
It bothers me that the field, so I left in 2014, essentially not progressed at all. So we're in this time of massive acceleration where we went from no AI to the sort of things that come out weekly these days, which are
Uh-huh.
just mind blowing, like
Right.
how fast this is all moving. And this field that I had a role in starting, building the first quantum computers that actually worked and then
Yes.
being the first person to actually sell one. Going from where we were in 2014 to 10 years later now and seeing virtually no progress really doesn't give me a good feeling. So what I wanted to try to do is come back and tie the bow. We started the thing, we built the first ones. The whole field has kind of gone, stagnant, notwithstanding all the press releases from Google and all that.
Uh-huh.
And what I would like to do is see if I could create the world's first useful application of a quantum computer. So I
Okay.
felt like if I could come back and do that, I could kind of put that but in the rear view mirror and move on. But I still feel like there's a thing is not done yet. We started out to do something and it's not finished, and I don't see it being finished the way things are going. So I want to come back and do something about it.
Yeah, very good. what types of organizations or entities have and are you talk about selling the first quantum computer? Who actually has quantum computers out there now that's using them? Is it just scientific, or who actually has quantum computers?
There are a bunch. The they're at different levels of ease of use, so they're not all the same in terms of how easy they are to access and program and use. Probably the most easy to use and widespread is the D-Wave type because
Okay.
there are a lot of effort has been put into the cloud infrastructure side. So the software and the tutorials and the documented use cases and everything is, you write your stuff in Python the way you normally do. It's kind of easiest to use and understand. But there are others. IBM has a system. Google has a system. There are a bunch of other smaller organizations that have hardware platforms with software on top that you can go in and use. There's probably about, order a dozen different companies that they create hardware that they ostensibly allow others to use, although sometimes the marketing doesn't meet you know, the the reality. But about a dozen. And in terms of companies that have bought them for use, it's probably about the same. Roughly 10 to 20 different companies have purchased quantum computers and are using them. And usually what they're using them for is high throughput experimentation to try to see if they'll do something that the company cares about. So the first one that I sold was to Lockheed Martin
Okay.
a long time ago, 2010, I think. And their particular interest was a problem which is called formal verification, validation and verification, which is given a piece of software that runs in a fighter plane. How sure am I that there are no bugs? So in writing software for complex systems like fighter jets, it is not easy to figure out if there's a bug in the code. And even defining what a bug is actually not easy. So just the anecdote. So the guy who ran the SR-71 Blackbird
Uh,
program
uh-huh.
came to our office in Vancouver. This would have been 2009, I think. And he brought with him a printout because that's what they do these days of a sheet of code which was written in the C language, which was some of the original code that ran on the F-16s that were deployed. And they had found a bug in the code that they'd obviously patched. But the challenge was, and we had no idea this was coming. They handed us the sheet of paper and said, "I want you to use your quantum computer to find the bug in this code," because we had sold one of the capabilities was this thing called formal verification or formal validation and verification. So our chief scientist at the time, a guy named Bill McCready, took the code, you know, manually typed it into the interface that we built, and the system immediately found the bug.
Wow.
And that was the thing that sold the machine because
Huh.
we'd presented the guy had come in with a problem we'd never seen before. We didn't know what was happening. We did it on the fly in the meeting, found
Huh.
it, and he says, "I want one of those." So the problem was that particular slice of code and the bug were easy to find.
Okay.
Generally speaking, the problems that they cared about were not. There were things they hadn't found yet,
Sure.
using all of this technology that they knew how to build. So when they applied the systems to those problems, there was a whole other story. You needed bigger chips, you needed faster clock speeds, you needed more memory, you needed all of these different things. And then that started driving our roadmap. So the system that they bought couldn't do the problem that they wanted ultimately, which is to push the state of the art in this field. But it gave us a direction to progress the technology in it. So like right now, that's still what happens is a company will buy one of these machines on a promise, usually because it solved a toy problem they care about.
Uh-huh.
And then when they deploy it, they find it's actually not good enough to do what they really want for some reason. But you only find out after the fact. So that's generally the state of the art right now, is that nothing has actually gone above the bar.
Interesting. How about to the extent you still have visibility in there, what are your thoughts on AI in robotics now, or in humanoid robots like you were working on before, and just the developments there?
Yeah, it's a total green field right now. I think like there's massive opportunity. The kind of AI that's built now has, I think, discovered what you could think of as the algorithm of intelligence, like the actual process you need to follow in order to get something that does something that you want. We know how to do that now. The issue is that robots or people or animals, the data that you need is from the perspective of the robot. So if I think about like what is the data that enters my brain, it comes from my eyes, my skin, my
Uh-huh.
my senses. And what's the data that comes out of my brain is the movement of my body, my mouth when I speak, my fingers when I type, and my feet when I walk, and all of that. So the kind of data that is required to train the algorithm of intelligence for an animal or a person comes from robots. So right now there is almost none of that. It's a very new field.
Okay.
And at Kindred, my first robotics company, we were the first to actually make hay of this. So we collected an enormous amount of data of robots doing things in warehouses. These weren't humanoids; they were big arms that grabbed things and put them in different places.
Okay.
And then we trained one of these, what you think of as a modern AI algorithm, to do the limited number of things we cared about in the warehouse, which is mostly picking things up and putting them in places.
Uh-huh.
So that whole idea holds together, and now the problem is how do you get enough data to create something that's essentially human-like, like data from Star Trek? How do you do that?
Uh-huh.
In the current thesis, the way you do it is you create a lot of robots that look like data but are really, really dumb, and then
Okay.
you allow them to explore the world,
Uh-huh.
and then you collect all the data, and then you subject this data to a process which is very similar to the way that the data from the internet is used now to create modern AI, except now it's a different kind of data. And then at the end of the day, you get something like DeepSeek or the GPTs, except instead of just spewing out language, what it's spewing out is movement,
Uh-huh.
but movement of things like speakers, like speaking, or fingers, like doing a job in a warehouse or in a factory. So I think like I'm very confident that the AI driven robotics is going to become the overwhelmingly number one use of AI. So people
Okay.
don't get this yet because it's kind of a little bit weird to make the frame shift from AI as a thing that lives in my computer that generates poetry or whatever the hell you're using it for,
Uh-huh.
to AI is a thing that lives in a robot that generates movement and all we are really is movement. That's a
Uh-huh.
very hard jump for people. But what the thing that things once they see it, once it starts working, it will be like that is so obvious.
Yes.
Um, I thought of that. This always happens is that
Right.
everybody in the ecosystem who didn't understand what the hell you were talking about 10 years ago is going to claim they invented it. Elon Musk is going to claim that he invented humanoid robots when he copied the idea from us.
Uh-huh.
The people who are building these AI systems now are going to claim they invented it for robotics, which they didn't. It's been around for a while now. So it's a huge opportunity on the business side. I think it's hard, but a lot of advanced technology now is in this category. It's really hard. But from perspective of like a business return, nearly the entire economy is built on moving things from place to place.
Mm-hmm.
The whole sort of idea that current AI is going to automate all jobs is absolutely ridiculous. It's clearly wrong because most things in the economy aren't somebody sitting at a computer typing.
Right.
There are a lot of things like that, but most of the economy is people bringing packages to your door or building something in the first place and building a factory that builds things, and manufacturing is a large part of the modern economy. Building a house, like none of those things happen with the stupid thing that's running in your computer.
Right.
It happens through the activity of a thing, an embodied agent. So, but once people get this, the whole attitude on AI is going to flip, and no one's going to care too much about this sort of AI thing that people build today, and
Uh-huh.
everybody is going to care about this other thing
Yeah.
because it's going to be much, much more valuable.
Yeah. What are you talking talking about Elon? What are your thoughts on, and this is obviously just conjecture, but him talking about, in the not too distant future, there'll be two humanoid bots per human on Earth. And that's more like in the consumer sense, like in your home and doing stuff for you, like personal assistant humanoid robots.
Elon is very good at painting a future that sounds reasonable, but it's going to take a lot longer than he claims.
Uh-huh.
And he does it on purpose because you need to fund these things and get people interested in them. So
Hmm.
you have to show them the end result. So it'd be like taking, a 5-year-old kid and saying, taking them to the Super Bowl and, the Eagles won and said, you're going to win the Super Bowl. Like it's the goal, it's the
Uh-huh.
thing that you aspire to when you put on your helmet for the first time when you're 5.
Uh-huh.
But nearly no one gets to the Super Bowl when they're 5. You have
Uh-huh.
to be 20 at least.
Right.
And only if you're really lucky and very talented and everything goes right. So Elon is like this is he'll take something which is relatively new. He'll do some testers into the field to see if it resonates with people. And if it does, he'll paint the end picture and he say it's right around the corner. So the question about whether eventually we're going to have robots in our homes, the answer is obviously yes. I
Hmm.
mean, eventually. But the question is how long it's going to take and what happens in the interim. I actually think that robots in the home are going to be the last place they go, not because
Okay.
of technological reasons, but because of social reasons. Is that a robot of this sort is a sense system. It senses things around it. Like that's what it does.
Hmm.
It absorbs the knowledge of the world around it in the course of doing what it's doing. And when it's in your home, those things are things like everything you say, everything you do, how you look like all at 24 hours a day, because it's going to be
Uh-huh.
looking at you in your home all the time.
Uh-huh.
And that data is not going to reside on the robot. It goes into the cloud because that's
Sure.
the way these algorithms work, because you can't train them locally. They train somewhere else in a giant compute factory. So this robot's going to be poking around inside your house, looking at everything you have, hearing everything you say in the privacy of your own home. And all of that is going to go somewhere that you have no control over. And it's
Hmm.
going to be used to train algorithms that you don't benefit from, except indirectly. Uh, the privacy issues alone are enough to kill this idea.
Uh-huh.
But the other problem, which is much more immediate, is that these algorithms give agency to the machines, which means the machines are making decisions on their own. And the nature of these decisions is very much like the output of a large language model. This thing people call hallucination,
Right.
which is
Yes.
the when it goes off and says something wrong. The analog in a physical machine is it does something very dangerous or stupid in the physical world. For example, your humanoid robot goes over to your gas stove in the middle of the night and turns it on. Why? Well, maybe it was dreaming that it was cooking you breakfast, but it
Uh-huh.
forgot to like actually light the burner and now your house explodes. Or it picks up a knife and starts stabbing you with it. And the reason why, well, it knows you like sandwiches and it forgot for a moment that you're not an ingredient in a sandwich. So these sound ridiculous, but they're exactly the
Yes.
sort of thing that is going to happen if you put the current state anyway into something like a home. So way this is done in reality, not in Elon world,
Uh-huh.
is that you take a robot that's barely able to do anything at all, you corral it, which by which is meant no people are around it, and then you test to see if it can actually do the thing for real. And an example of a company that does this very well is Agility Robotics. So if
Okay.
anybody's interested in seeing how it actually works in the real world, Agility has a bunch of videos of their stuff actually doing things in the real world, and you'll see it's in a corral and it just does the thing over and over and over again. So the way that these algorithms are going to progress is eventually we'll sort out all of the bugs. And just like self-driving cars, we'll figure out how to do it safely.
Hmm.
But it's going to take 10 to 20 years to get there. And in the interim, what we're going to do is this gradual introduction of this new kind of robotics into the kinds of places robots typically live, which are factories and warehouses. And that's going to be the way it goes. And the Elon is very good at painting pictures of futures. And someday maybe we will be on Mars. I certainly hope so. And someday we'll have self-driving cars dominating the roads. And
Hmm.
someday we'll have humanoid robots in our homes. But none of those things are going to happen overnight. They're going to
Yeah.
be the end result of a lot of work.
Yeah. How about your thoughts on, talk about like teaching core values and ethics and morality to AI? What are your thoughts around that? And then whose morals, whose ethics?
Well, I think that second question is the tough one.
Mm.
So the first one, you can always put guardrails in that prevent a machine from doing certain things, or you could try. But the harder problem is, what are they? And the you don't have to look very far to see that different people disagree about fundamental issues in moral and ethical behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody's wrong, right? I think this is an important point, is that these sorts of things are, I hate to use this word because it sounds so woke, but they're social constructs.
Uh-huh.
So they're agreements that we have as a society about how we're going to behave. And these agreements change from time to time and from culture to culture. And nobody's wrong. It's just the way this society has agreed to behave at a particular, place and time.
Mm-hmm.
And they can be dramatically different. And it's not that there's some people are evil and some people are good. No, it's that there are people who have fundamental disagreements about the right way to live. So I tend to be very, I suppose, what you could call conservative
Uh-huh.
as a person.
Me too.
I don't like the intervention of government in
Right.
anything.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Uh, but okay, so that's my politics, and actually love what Trump is doing.
Yes. I
So I
know.
think
It's
that
amazing.
I don't like him as a person because he's a little bit too funny for me.
Uh-huh.
I'd like him to have a little bit more gravitas, but the things that he's actually doing, which I think this is an
Right.
important point that I don't know if everybody gets. Who you are is what you do.
Right.
And
100%.
at the end of the day, the actions that a senior political leader takes define their success or failure.
Yep.
What they say in Twitter and they you might think they're a terrible person is not the point, because that's not their job. Their job
Right.
is not to be an angel. Their job is to make hard decisions about
Mm-hmm.
the way the society should go. So I think the going back to the question about robots. So there was a period we went to that I think we're almost through, where all of these AI companies were riddled with this kind of woke mind virus, and it
Right.
was just
Mm-hmm.
poisoning everything that they did. And the thing about it is, I understand the motivations behind a lot of these ideas to be good to other people and not judge people too harshly for
Mm-hmm.
things they don't control and all that. But what ended up happening is it got malevolent and pathological, and it started
Yeah.
to infect like a cancer these places, and it seeped into these AI models because people were starting to inject this kind of like dangerous, you know, cancerous ideology into the technology itself by putting guardrails in that somebody like me didn't agree with.
Right.
So I think the way that this is going to go is that your AI that is in your robot is going to have a bunch of choices which are drawn from the moral philosophies that are kind of important ones but different, and you can choose which moral philosophy to run in your robot. So for
Interesting.
example, if I had a robot, I could choose it to be Buddhist, which means that when it makes decisions, it's always going to revert to the Buddhist principles. Or if I actually had one, it would be the Christian moral principles is the one I would pick.
Mm-hmm.
But you could also say, I'm going to choose the materialist, atheistic, nihilistic, woke type. I could choose that, and then it would behave like that. And the which moral principles that I followed would be my choice. So I think that's what's going to happen, is that the AI models at their base, when they have to have a foundation, which is not like a be all and end all like first principles thing, but it's a choice that I make about my moral and ethical framework. People are going to be able to choose which, and it's going to be a menu, which is like, here are the major world belief systems. Which one of these do you want this robot to default to? And the same thing is going to happen in the digital AI world. So if you go to DeepSeek or ChatGPT or whatever, Claude, and you ask it something, you don't have a choice, as far as I know, to determine, what is the moral foundation of the answer that I'm giving. So if I
Right.
ask, is euthanasia a moral principle that is good or not, then the answer depends on which of these I pick. In some of them, it will be yes, and some of them it will be no.
And it would be nice to say, well, my own personal belief system corresponds with, say, the Christian ethos, and I would
Hmm.
like to understand how this question would be answered in that frame. And you'll be able to do this. And in fact, it'll just be normal, and everybody will do things this way.
That's very interesting. Is, I mean, is kind of going to first principles, is there an underlying moral ethic that will be built into all AI? Or, I mean, talk about the choices. I'm just wondering, I don't know, maybe there isn't. Maybe it is, there's just certain guardrails, but then you build on top of that the choices you're talking about. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's just a
because
question to ponder. Yeah.
I think like if you ask, do all of the major belief systems of people agree on anything at all? And there might be some small number of things that everybody agrees on, maybe. But the thing is, like, there are always exceptions. For example, if let's say I'm I'm being persecuted in Nazi Germany in 1939, is it ethical or moral for me to fight back? I think the answer everybody would give is yes, because it's
Mhm.
typically viewed as being an evil regime that was doing evil things, which I agree with. So there's a context in which violence is the correct answer to a problem. And you don't have to go very far in human history to see that if you don't protect your way of life, you can lose it. So the if you ask the question now, well, is it moral to kill somebody? The answer is sometimes yes. And this ambiguity and context dependence means that when you're thinking about frameworks for like AI systems, the answer is not easy. You can't just
Mhm.
do an Isaac Asimov wrote a whole bunch of stories about this, is about you can't make laws to govern the behaviors of robots that always work in every situation. It's just not possible.
Uh-huh.
So we're gonna have to think more about ethical and moral behavior being context dependent. It depends on a lot of things. It's not always the answer is black and white, yes or no. This is good or this is bad. It depends on the situation you're in, and these frameworks are going to have to be flexible enough to handle that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Oh, very good. How about just, the title of our podcast is Capitalist Culture. How has just like a capitalist free market system allowed you to have the success you've had, or even beyond you, allowed AI and quantum computing to evolve over time?
Although all of these fields are driven entirely by revenue. I
Hmm.
mean, the generation of value for other people drives technology. And it's very, very simple, is that the capitalist engine is intimately tied to technological and scientific process in a way that you can't disentangle the two. The reasons are very similar to, say a sports analogy. So if I am in a more socialist or even communist culture, and everybody gets a participation trophy and nobody wins,
Hmm.
and you're say counting by the amount of money that you make or the resources you have access to, there's no drive to excel. So
Right.
everybody's going to the level is going to just continue to drop, and everybody's going to drop with it in a competitive environment where everybody's competing for the trophy, and there's only one winner. People work harder, they try better, they think more clearly, and all of those things now are very closely connected. Money is connected to scientific advancements and technological advancements. So the two are both intimately connected. They're the best way that we found to advance is to compete.
Hmm.
And in my own personal experience, none of the fields that I've worked in would exist at all in their current forms if it weren't for this sort of competition, which is
Uh-huh.
ultimately grounded in the generation of value, which turns into money, which turns into wealth. So I think there is no other way that people have ever found to build a flourishing society other than we all have to compete against each other to build the best possible things we can.
Yeah. Oh, very good. How about reflecting back, what would you say have been an important decision or action you've taken that have been most pivotal to your success so far?
Well, yeah, this is a complicated one because I actually don't feel like I've succeeded
Hmm.
yet. I think everything that I've been involved in is still kind of like half baked.
Mm-hmm.
So quantum computing is half baked, AI for robotics is half baked. It's got something, it's moved a little bit, but it's not done.
Mm-hmm.
So like the knee jerk answer that I've got to your question is like I pick things that were technologies that people wanted to use, but I'm not sure that's actually true yet. It hasn't actually been shown to be true.
Sure.
So it's tough. I think like another thing is I guess if I was going to give advice to somebody who's thinking about doing the entrepreneurial thing or building their
Yes.
own companies, probably the most important thing that you can do is pick the right people to be your closest allies.
Mm.
So you've got a company is a little bit like a platoon. It's got there you're going to war, and the people around you are going to save your life or not. And you want the kind of people around you that you can trust 100% are going to be there in the way that you need them to be there when the shit hits the fan, because it
Mm-hmm.
will happen like right away.
Uh-huh.
Being an entrepreneur is a blood sport.
Yes, it is.
It's not, tea parties and, you know, roses. Every day is a battle. So you got to have people who are going to be there for you when you're in the shit. And so I think one of the things you really need to be good at is being more objective about gauging the people around you, because our tendency is to always give trust and give people the benefit of the doubt, which is a very good thing to do when you're talking about your friendships and your social life. When you're talking about actually building a team for a company, there's another level you have to go to, which is I'm going to take the blinders off now. This person is my friend, but I'm going to look at this more objectively. Will I be able to trust this person when the shit goes down? And be really honest with yourself and try to find the people where the answer is hell yes,
Uh-huh.
and then surround yourself with them, because those are the people who are going to lift you up when things get tough. And all of the rest of the thing, like the products and the how you actually tactically do things, are secondary issues to having this kind of like you know this band of brothers and sisters,
Uh-huh.
people who are going to be with you when things get tough. It's a lot more of a person thing. I came from theoretical physics. I'd never really even had a
Uh-huh.
job before I founded my first company. I did not realize how important the human element was to success in anything. It's more important than everything else. Is you got to be able to trust the people around you. And I've made some very bad mistakes in this, and reflecting back on my career, where I've trusted people that I shouldn't have,
Mm-hmm.
um, or I hadn't given enough trust to people that deserved it. And those things always come back to bite you.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. How about in your practice of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, how has that helped you shape or think about your business and being an entrepreneur?
Well, I think all combative sports teach fundamental lessons about life. One of them is there's always somebody tougher than you.
Mm-hmm.
So humility. Um, Another thing that's sort of a side effect, though, of humility is that the person who's tougher than you doesn't always win.
Yes.
And the what ends up winning in the long run is persistence.
Uh-huh.
I think that this is another very important lesson, is that the person who loses is the person who gives up first.
Yes. So true.
So I have, especially now I'm getting older, my body doesn't work the same as it used to. And so I've got, I'll go to practice and there'll be some mid-20s competitive purple belt who's like, had a bad day and wants to take it out on me. And I just get beaten the hell up for like 20 minutes. But And my attitude towards that has changed over time now is that, can I survive?
Uh-huh.
Can at the end of the 20 minutes, this person be lying in a puddle of their own sweat? And I'm like, I could go another 20. Do you want to keep going? And I think that this attitude that everything is like a war of attrition
Mm-hmm.
is something you learn, especially in jiu-jitsu. Not so much in wrestling, it's a much more explosive short sport, but in jiu-jitsu, the being able to last is the key. The other thing is obvious stuff like if you want, you have to set goals.
Mm-hmm.
You have to train to achieve them. They won't just happen.
Yes.
And the effort that you put into training reflects directly back on how likely it is you're going to succeed. So you got to work, you got to have a plan, and you got to keep doing it. And eventually you're going to win if you last long enough. So I think that there are a lot of parallels. In some ways, I find like combative sports are a little bit like they're like a parable, like a Bible story.
Uh-huh.
Is that they're not literally the way life works, but there's so many parallels and lessons that you can learn from the experience that, it's another reason why I recommend this to everybody is that, it shines a light on some very important things about the way to live properly and how to succeed and how to think about success and failure. Um, like I was watching the UFC this past weekend, and
Huh.
one of the guys in the main event lost, and he went on YouTube and did a thing where he was talking about like what what it was like to lose, and what to do about it, and it was quite good. Like everybody loses in life. It's a thing that everybody understands. Um, but the reaction to loss, there's only one, is go back to practice the next day.
Uh-huh.
There is no other response. Anything else that you do is worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think in life and in combative sports, the answer is like when you lose or you suffer a defeat or something bad happens, the only thing you can do is go back to practice the next day.
Uh-huh.
It makes life simple. It's not complicated. You just gotta get back on the horse.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. All right, last question here. Success. What is your personal definition of success? And you can frame that or use that any way you want.
Man, this is a tough one. I think early in my life, I counted success by, victories. How many things have I won or done, in sports or in business, signing a big deal, winning a gold medal at the, local NAGA tournament, whatever. Those were the things that I counted as success. As I accumulated more and more, medals and trophies and accomplishments that kind of just I put in a shelf at the end of the day, I started wondering, what is one more? Does it change anything? And I've kind of shifted a little bit. Like I think when you're younger, it's good to count victories,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what they are. Things that you set out to do and you accomplish, goals accomplished, let's put it that way. But as you get older, I think that there's something different that seeps in is that you accumulate a lifetime of regret. And I think this happens with everybody. There are things that you wish you'd done differently or, decisions that you made in hindsight that weren't good ones. And what it does is it erodes your peace.
Mm.
So the sense that you are at peace with yourself and the world around you starts to degrade over time. At least it has with me. So now I think like success for me personally is I'm still interested in winning things. Like, don't get me wrong, but I think that there's something else that's happened, which is not wanting to feel the things that disrupt your inner peace has become more important to me recently. So I want to be at peace with myself and the world around me as a central goal. Like this is, framing things as goals.
Sure.
I would like to not be overcome by feelings of living in the past, and regretting different things that have happened or, I maybe caused. So this idea of being at peace, I think, is something I would have not understood or kind of even discarded even 10 years ago, because it sounds like something an old person would say, which maybe it is. But I'm kind of getting into that phase of my life where I think you start thinking about other things as being more important than just how many trophies do I have. And so trying to find ways uh, to be more at peace with, the path my life has taken, I think is a bigger part of the way I think now. And by the way, I'm actually, as part of this, doing a thing where I'm planning to run across Canada. So it's
Oh,
8,000 kilometers,
okay.
and not many people have done it. And I think like a part of this is like I've always found that walking, running, centers me. So if some weird shit is going on, doing this thing like holds me in the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to see if this experience of doing this massive endurance event changes me as a person. So I don't have to work anymore. I'm free to not.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to take a year out and see what happens when you do an 8,000 kilometer walk. Does it make you a better person, more at peace with yourself, or does it do something bad to you? Injuries, or I wish I hadn't done that kind of feeling.
Uh-huh.
So I'm gonna try to go after this peace thing aggressively, as I always do,
Mhm.
uh, by trying to walk my way towards the Zen state.
That's incredible. But as a person that competes in endurance events and triathlon and others, and reading books and watching, uh, there's no question that's going to change you. I
Yeah.
mean, and I think in the midst of that and the suffering that comes with endurance, you'll definitely find peace. Like I think
Yeah, I hope so.
that's probably a guarantee.
I blame David Goggins for setting me on this
Yes.
path. I started
Yes.
running marathons because of him, and
Uh-huh.
this whole thing, I'm kind of like channeling my inner Goggins.
Uh-huh. Goggins will do that to you. That's for sure. I remember one day I was training for a marathon and I had to do like a 10-mile run and it was pouring rain out. That was kind of the one thing I didn't ever run in. But I'm like, I'm going out. And so I was listening to Goggins's book, his first book, and nobody's out there. I mean, it's pouring rain. And I'm just like, got my arms in the air and I'm just yelling, Goggins, 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 screaming at the top of my lungs because nobody can hear me. And then the next day, I went for a run in the kind of late afternoon and it was blazing hot. I mean, 90s, super humid in Minnesota, same thing. I was just out there, my channeling Goggins, listening to the book as I'm running. And I think he's done that to a lot of people around the world.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, good. Well, Geordie Rose, this was awesome. Thank you so much. I can honestly say this has been one of the most fascinating and impactful and one of my favorite episodes we've done so far. So thank you very much.
Well, excellent. Thanks for having me on. Really
Oh,
appreciate it.
for sure. And we'll share all your information in the show notes and information on Snowdrop. And yeah, I just want to thank you again. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so very much.
Yeah. Thanks again.
You bet.